Before we move, I want you to know what we're working on today. Pack and stack. Put your, I just gave you all a copy of a poem, and you should have your little card with your oxymorons on it next to that. That's how we're going to move. Henry, you're going to need to take that under your, what's under your desk too. Pack and stack, pack and stack. Okay. Eyes back on me in 3, 2, come on, Cole. Let me see those eyes. Thank you. All right. Today, we're going to start by manipulating 2 complex sentences. You guys say, what does that mean? But if you look behind me right now, these are our complex sentences. We're going to do a little review there. We're going to efficiently work together to decipher another couple of Emily Dickinson poems that have big 25-cent words in them. I want you guys to figure out as a group today how to do that the most efficiently you can. We're going to work together to figure out what these poems are about, and we're going to use evidence, meaning stuff actually written in the poems, to kind of come up with a new word I want to play with today. The word is tone. Dylan, what's the new word?
Tone.
Tone. When you have tone in your writing, you have an attitude about your topic, all right? And today, Emily Dickinson's going to write not about nature, she's going to write about death today, all right? Death, and what is her attitude or tone about those subjects, all right? So I want to try some new efficiency things. So everybody look at your number 5 oxymoron. That should be the math one.
Elementary calculus.
Dawson, you're tall. Tell everybody what yours is. No.
Random patterns.
Random patterns, all right? Samantha, what's yours? Beyond infinity. If you have beyond infinity, you're going to move towards Samantha. Tyler, what's yours? Try this one. What? Same. Dylan, what's yours? 5.
Elementary calculus.
All right, there's 3 of the 7 that are out there. The rest of you have permission to shout out your words and find each other. Let's not use those 4 desks. Let's try to get all groups of 4. There will be one group of 3. Go, find your group. See if you can do it in less than a minute. Half empty up front here. Where are half empties? I knew you'd find each other. Where's my exact approximation group? You are the group of 3 today, just so you know. That would have been. What are we missing today? What is that? What is that?
Are you guys ready for your approximation? No, we're your
Oh. Then I'm wrong. All right. Then you guys all have exact approximation? Okay, excellent. All right.
That's a marker.
Eyes on me in 3, 2, Mr. Mason, thank you. 1. All right, we learn. You know what's interesting about this poem that we looked at the other day? First of all, I have 3 dots there. These are only 4 of the 6 stanzas in this poem. There weren't really too many vocabulary words in this poem. It wasn't a hard poem to decipher, except for maybe that word right there, which we looked up the other day. All of the rest of the words are words you should know, but what poets do is sometimes they describe things in ways so that you have to make your brain play dictionary and figure out what they are. It took a lot of you a while to figure out the narrow fellow in the grass was actually a snake. She never says snake in the poem once. She also never says reptile. She calls it 0 at the bone at the end. And that's what poetry deciphering a lot of times is. You have to get in there and grab pieces of the text and say, maybe these couple of words, she's hinting at this idea. We're gonna do the same thing today, but with some darker poems, more ominous poems about death. Nature and death, those were Emily Dickinson's 2 areas. First thing you do to understand a poem is you figure out what all the words mean, and the second thing is you look for what the poet's trying to say about them. Where did I give you the hint that Emily Dickinson probably tells you? Travis? Last couple of stanzas is probably the place where she's going to pass on her tone or her attitude, and that's what I want you guys to figure out what you can do with today. Let's take a look at Emily. Sorry, I am going to dim one light here.
She's scary.
Well, people say that, but keep in mind, 1830s to 1886, less focus on cosmetics and things like that. And then she wasn't she was a pretty lady. But if you look at that picture, you say to yourself, that's kind of a picture you might see in kind of a scary movie hanging on the wall, wouldn't you? And it's she was a recluse. We talked about that a little bit, but let's talk about Emily today, and let's do a little respect of Emily Dickinson because she had some profound thoughts about the concepts she wrote about. Her two big questions are, she always talks about what nature is about, all right, how nature, what relationship we should have with the natural world. The natural world's been around a lot longer than we've been around, and so she says, what can we learn from that? And her other big topic, as you get older, you do start thinking about the inevitable. Let's face facts, you young people. When you're born, you do have to admit to the fact that one of these days you have an expiration date on you, just like a milk carton, all right? That's kind of a dark way to say it. But as you get older and older, you start saying, I wonder what happens. Is it really the end? Is there something beyond? And no matter what you believe, no matter who you know, everybody kind of has a different opinion, but not one single person really knows what happens to us when we pass away from this world. And Emily Dickinson, as a poet, said, I can put some interesting ideas behind that, all right? So in one of her poems, not the ones we're going to read today, she said, my life closed twice before its close. My life closed twice before its close. She said, I died twice before I really died. And I always think that's an interesting thought, and maybe that'll help you think about what she's going to talk about today. So why are we doing all this? This is just a little slide today to kind of show you where we're going. We are ending the last quarter. It's like 3-4 weeks away. We're ending the last quarter with a pretty hard piece of text. It's like Emily Dickinson, but it's in novel form. You have to really read it carefully and analyze it, and you're going to have to write an essay that critically analyzes what you think the author's trying to say. And one of the smartest things you can focus on is what's the author's tone about the topic that they're talking about here. And that's what we're going to work on today, is can you figure out how Emily Dickinson feels about her topic, death, in the poems that we are looking at today, all right? Is she scared of it? Is she looking forward to it? Does she think it's mysterious? You guys have to figure out a tone or an attitude, all right? First though, grammar, all right? Let's get into some grammar. Here are the first 2 lines of the first poems I'm giving you here today. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Very famous Emily Dickinson poem. Another poem, I heard a fly buzz when I died. That's another very famous Emily Dickinson poem. We're going to study them both today. Here's some secret information for you. Complex sentence patterns. I'm going to take the flag down, not out of disrespect for the flag, but just so you can see them all for a moment. Those 2 sentences are both complex sentences. Work with your group, and I want to know 100% which 2 patterns of those 8 you think those are being represented. Talk right now. As a group, 100%. I want 100% of you to be confident.
For the first one, since it starts with because, which is a SC pattern.
The next one I heard
Yeah, it's SC2.
when I died.
It's gotta be.
And then the second one is
Each person has to agree.
we're doing it as a group, so
So the first one is the SC2, right?
yeah, definitely.
And then I heard
Fly buzz when I died.
You think you know?
When?
Hang on.
What?
CC pattern 2, 3.
When is not a CC.
We hinted a little at it. We didn't really study it.
When is an SC?
All right, show of hands. Who's 100% confident they know both of them? Ooh, back group, no?
Oh, yeah.
Nathan, you close? Yeah. Lexi, you close? All right, I will give you this hint. They're both the same kind of conjunction. Does that help? Okay, everybody still feeling comfortable about their answer? All right, the answer is... Now, for those of you who didn't know for sure, make sure you understand why. Ask your group before we move past this. I need you guys to understand these complex patterns. It's kind of easy when I underline the conjunction for you, isn't it? All right. Look especially at this bottom sentence, and Travis, you may have to stand a little bit to see this, I know that, all right? But I heard a fly buzz, first sentence, when, subordinated conjunction. Talk about a terribly short sentence, I died. That's just simply the sentence, that's this whole second half of the sentence. You can do that, you can get by making a subject and a predicate work with just 2 words. If you're good at it, Emily Dickinson was good at it. All right, so you know which patterns they are. Guess what your task is gonna be?
heading a unit.
We'll read the poem. We'll read the poem. Wait, we are going to make them. Which one's not represented up there? Number 3. So here's your task. Here are the 2 sentences. Working with your group on the back side of your exit ticket, I would like you to write both of these sentences out as this magical third pattern, or as it's written down here. Hey guys, I keep having this mistake. This little guy right here, oh, I'm showing disrespect for this flag. This little guy right here is not the top of a semicolon. That's half of the dash that should have been with this P over there. And so don't put a semicolon right after your subject. It is just supposed to be a comma. All right, I want to hear groups talking. I want to make sure everyone in your group has exactly the same sentence. Go.
So it dropped down here, and I don't know.
Kindly stop for me because I could not stop.
It's not good.
Here it is.
This is the pattern. I want them all out.
Could not stop for me. Oh, wait, no, wait.
Don't start writing until your whole group agrees with you, please.
Death, kindly stop for me. Could not stop. Or we do death first.
I because death.
No, because death could not stop for me is the clause.
Or you do death.
Stop for it. Would you say stop for it?
Is death stop for me? I could not stop for him.
SC3.
Because I had
Yeah, but like,
death.
That's the pattern.
Stop for me.
I know that
I could not stop for him.
I'm happy with that idea.
I could not stop for
So
it.
2, nice.
Comma SC SP comma P.
Death could not. Oh wait, no. Death kindly. It's
You guys have your
it's
sentences
death
reversed. I'm going to
kindly.
give you that hint. I think
It's
you have your
death
2 sentences
kindly.
reversed.
oh, it's I.
It's death kindly.
The simply of a sentences.
When we die.
This lead can erase, so I didn't know exactly what we're writing.
Kindly stops for me.
Good. Nice reversal of pronoun.
Wait. No, not here. Just kindly stop.
Good. Good thought.
When I died.
You sure? That sounds pretty good. Are you sure though?
Yeah.
Did you change your answer, Andrew, or are you just writing it out twice? Make sure you get to the second sentence too. I heard a fly buzz when I die. What's that going to sound like in subordinated conjunction? Pattern number 3.
When I died, heard a fly buzz.
Does your group agree?
We finished, right?
Yeah, we finished, guys.
15 seconds. Oh, some of you are debating that second one, aren't you?
When a fly buzz.
Because it has that. Because there's no SC at the beginning of it.
Would it be I?
It's S.
When died, heard a fly buzz. When I died, heard a fly buzz.
Describing fly buzzing. So that's we'll go with I heard a fly when I died. But
Oh,
that makes sense.
Jared's thinking hard about this one. Good job. All right.
Just stop.
Let's stop
Let's stop a grammar.
and see how we did.
I heard a fly.
I'm going to call on this group first because they're the only group who didn't take a certain liberty that some of you took, and we'll see whose sentence sounds a little bit better. So Anna, why don't you read the top sentence? Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. How did you change that?
He, because I could not stop for death, kindly stopped for me.
He, comma, because I could not stop for death, kindly stopped for me. Who did it differently? Quite a few groups did it differently. Let's see. Riley, how did your group make it sound?
Death, because I could not stop for him, he kindly stopped for me.
Did you say the he twice, or did you not say the he twice? Because you can do that, actually. You'd have to add another subject on here. But notice what they did. They decided that starting with the word he, without clarifying who the he was, they thought they would move death over there. That did mean that you had to change the he to what later on, though? Because I could not stop for him, all right? So death, because I could not stop for him, kindly stopped for me. That's how I do it. Let's hear the second one. Michaela, how'd you do the second one?
When I heard a fly buzz, died.
All right, here's what I want your group to talk about. That is absolutely correct. I, comma, when I died, comma, heard a fly buzz, all right? That is the sentence in that pattern. Talk as a group. Does that sound better, or does that sound worse than the way that Emily Dickinson wrote it? Talk with your group for 15 seconds. Go.
Necessarily better if you're trying to just write it simply and make it flow more.
It sounds
I think
childish.
this sentence might be better in a report or something, because it makes you think about it and puts some context behind it. But if you're trying to make it all like mysterious and poetic, I think you just want it.
Yes.
If you look at the poem, when she has it written, she has
The when plus the subject complete. You can't just move the word. That's exactly right. Good memory, Scott. All right.
So it's supposed to make you.
Thumbs up if you think it sounds better when you move it. Thumbs down if you think it sounds better the way Emily first wrote it. Let's see some thumbs. Everybody, thumbs up if you think the way you wrote it the second time sounds better. Ooh, mostly thumbs down again. I don't know. I think I agree with you, but you guys have heard of the beatnik poets, right? They like talk with lots of pauses. Check this out. What if we said, I, when I died, heard a fly buzz. All right. Does that sound better than trying to say it really fast? Yeah. You get away with it. That's the power of poetry, the power of pause, my friends. All right, the poems are in front of you. Do me a favor, actually, before we leave exit tickets, make sure your name is on them so that when I collect them at the end of the period, I know who to give credit to for correctly manipulating these sentences grammatically. Yes, sir? Mm-hmm. You could, but you made a rhyme out of it. That's a good call. All right. Our two poems for the day. All right. As we listen to them the first time, Mr. Mason, we are going to have our pencils ready, and if there's any word that we think our group is going to need to use the dictionary or talk to each other to make sure we all understand what that word means as we read these, and you will be reading today, as we read these, I would like you to underline them or circle them, because you're going to prove to me that you can efficiently decipher what these poems mean by getting past the hard vocabulary words. So Sonia, would you like to start? Because I could not stop for death. Just that first stanza. Everybody follow along, look for words we might have to decipher.
Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality.
Good. Any words in there that you need to underline or not? Just go ahead and take care of it. Scott, would you do stanza 2?
We slowly drove, he knows no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility.
Civility is how you say that. Fancy word for something you probably know, but if someone may have to look that up. Richie, third stanza.
We passed the school where children stove at recess in the rain. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun.
Nicely done. And Andrew, would you pick up the next one?
Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer, my gown, my tippet, only tule.
Oh, we're going to stop there and make sure you underline any words there that you think you're going to look up to understand this poem. It is not.
No, it's a guy from Looney Tunes.
Is that like a Looney Tunes character? I've heard that already today. No, Looney Tunes did not exist at the time of Emily Dickinson, so that's not what she was referring to. Stanza number 5, Emily S.
We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was sacred, scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground.
Good. And Dawson, last stanza.
Since then, to centuries and yet feel shorter than the day. At first sunrise, the horses' heads, but we're towards eternity.
Kind of a forced rhyme there at the end. She did that a lot. Her rhymes didn't perfectly rhyme, but they kind of sound like they could rhyme. All right, give you a second to underline any words before we look at the second one. Everybody good? Poem about death number 1. We are going to compare that poem's tone to poem about death number 2. Are they different? Are they the same? Of course, first we're going to have to decipher them. Let's get the second one out there so we hear it. Tia, would you start? I heard a fly buzz when I died.
I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm.
Nice. Drew, pick it up.
The eyes around had wrung dry and breaths were gathering firm. For the last onset when the king be witness in turn.
Jared.
I willed my keepsakes assigned away. What portion of me be assignable? And then it was there, interposed a fly.
And it was there, interposed a fly. And let's see. Michaela, would you do that last stanza?
With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, and the windows failed, and then I could not see.
To see. Make sure you see she says that twice. I could not see, to see. When a poet says something twice, that is supposed to mean something. I think before we get down and dirty with these poems about a dark topic, we need to sing them to a happy, jaunty tune. So, they're up there. You guys ready to sing?
Yes.
All right, do I need to remind you of the tune? All right, do I need to remind gentlemen with deeper voices? We repeat that last line. We're poems about a dark topic today. Let's make them sound a little ominous. What do I mean by ominous? Can someone tell me? Ominous. Who can tell me what ominous means? Serious part of it. No one knows ominous?
Dark and like scary.
Dark and scary. That last line, when we repeat it, better sound dark and scary. All right. Bum 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 bum. You guys know this, right? Because I could not stop for death. Sing along, everyone. Make it sound jaunty. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. Ominous immortality. Nice. All right, should we try the second one? All right, this one sounds even more ominous if you do it right. Ready? I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The what? Between the heaves of storm. All right, so we're going to start with the first task is going to be to decipher all the words. Here's the deal. I don't want to see one person in the group with the dictionary. I expect you guys to figure out how to assign the words so that in less than 5 minutes you can have an explanation of all the words for everyone. This is your copy. If you have the definition, you may write it right on the copy next to the word. The first trick of Emily Dickinson is you need to decipher what the hard words mean. Go.
Okay.
Figure out a plan. Figure out a plan.
On the first one, how many did you get?
Were there any words that nobody understood?
We're deciphering both. Start with one.
Like you know, strive. Like to strive for. I think it's past tense. I think
All right, I see a few groups have a plan, and everybody's digging the dictionaries for different words. Let's get a plan in place.
And then like if somebody else has it, once you find
Which means
it.
what, here we go.
Unself-vigorous.
Make sure you write that down so you can remember it when we get to it again.
One of the GT programs for advanced and not beginners level. Oh yeah, I always do stupid things like that.
We can run these, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Good definition. Travis, is that in your own words? Good.
Mr. Harrison?
Cornice. I also didn't know what that meant.
What a question. Was that?
I first accused the horse's heads which were eternity. Surmise. Accused.
No.
That's what this said.
Accused? Are you sure you read the right one?
Oh, okay. What was it? 1187? There's another one. To imagine or infer on slight sounds.
Okay, you go for the first one. That's going to be the more common one. A thought or idea.
Oh, that was 2 IQ. Okay.
That means not very much evidence. Scanty, very little. So
So basically, I think when she was saying golf,
almost an assumption, Tyler. Timothy, what you looking up for your group?
Imagine, infer on slight grounds to
Are you all there?
I think it might be the first one. It said like I first surmised the horse. She first concluded something about the horse's head.
Yeah, but the first one is a noun. Yeah, a thought or idea. So it's the second one, which means the same thing, kind of, but that one's a verb, and that's the only one that could be surmised.
I see it. It's the fourth word down at the top.
Civility.
How'd you miss that? How'd you miss that, Dawson?
Oh, it's right in between the 2 words. That doesn't count. Polite act or expression.
Past tense of strive. You may have to look up strive. I gotcha.
I don't like the dictionary.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
It's like
That one made
hard. Dictionaries are so annoying sometimes because, like, do you know how many words, like, I've looked up and it's like, go to this word, and then I go to this word, and it's all like, go to this word, and I go to this word, and then finally
30 seconds. Let's go. Let's go. Looks like we're being mostly efficient today.
There's Henry Butthole. There's Tall Tia.
and then what did you say? A short? What's a shear?
S-H-E-E-R?
A decorative band of metal.
That microphone.
Here, it's really thin and fine, like cloth.
Yeah, a sheer silk.
There you go.
A Kool-Aid is like a sheer silk. Like a thin silk, yeah.
That's a great way to
What does
describe
cornice
it.
mean?
Great way to describe it.
It's like the top frame of the house.
And you those, I always love it when you dictionary users beat the phone guys. All right, they're looking up the words on their phone. You guys are still winning.
I got
when it comes to
surmissed.
dictionaries. All right, now it's time to talk about just the first poem. Everybody, eyes up here. I know some of you are still writing down definitions, Richie. So let me have your eyes, Tyler, for just a second. I need you now to spend the next 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes. We'll see how the conversations go. Just the poem that's on the screen right now. Because I could not stop for death, I want you to arrive using evidence from things she said in here. What's her tone? What's her attitude about dying? Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. That word kindly right there, you're looking for words like that to help you. Now, I don't want you to get too lost in what the poem is about, Travis. So I'm going to give you a big hint what the poem is about right now, all right? Are you ready? Bam! It's what this poem's about. That's the car they drive in, all right? All right, you have 5, 6 minutes. Let's say 6 minutes. Just the because I could not stop death for death poem. I want you guys to figure out what she's talking about the whole way and what seems to be her tone. Go. Yes. No, this is what picks you up when you're dead.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're like dying on rosary, makes sense. Okay, so I feel like she's kind of like calm in a way that it's gonna come very close to face it.
So the little of it is not large.
Andrew, Jared, why aren't you talking with Scott and Katie? It's a whole group discussion, please.
What I was saying about like a road trip is maybe like
Richie, Tyler, make sure you
this would have a microphone. Yeah. I thought it was like some diabetic monument road. Like they're on yeah.
Like when you're dying.
quickly.
I don't think that she wants. She does. She does.
Everybody, pause. 1, 2, 3. Eyes on me. Everybody, remember. Shh. Poets speak in poetic riddles. She never says snake. She calls him a narrow fellow in the grass. The same thing is going on in this poem. Read the clues, all right? That's what those vocab words are for. If you're not back in the poem, stanza by stanza, figuring out what's going on so that you can arrive at a tone, you're not doing it the right way, all right? So get back in the poem. You shouldn't be speculating right now. You shouldn't be guessing. Go find evidence in the poem that tells you what the tone is. All right, back to what you were talking about. Go.
I think by what you guys said is that she's not trying to hide from death, but by the second to last stanza, it makes it seem like she's kind of scared of what's going to happen.
This forever, right? So what she's saying is like how
A little bit more haunted. She thought she would try to live her quivering and chill, but you do Andrew.
Children drove at recess memory. So she kind of sounds like she's reflecting on.
Was expecting. He wasn't expecting it, but she sort of welcomed it.
Yeah, she wasn't prepared for it, but she was.
Whereas the other poem is very much darker view on it.
All I can think of is ain't nobody else have it at. So the carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. Okay, we slowly drove to Reno Harrison.
Oh, she's saying that the carriage that basically the function is taking.
Nice. I think that might be a valid interpretation. Who's struggling? Who's struggling? Anyone?
The actual road trip.
Not struggling? I don't believe you. All right, guys, if you didn't catch, eyes up here. Let me talk you through a few more things before we get to the fly poem. Whose eyes don't I have? Thank you. First of all, this should be pretty easy, right? Where the journey happens. Did you notice we start with children, we go to things growing, and then we pass the setting sun? Does that remind you of anything? It's poetic. How is that life, Timothy?
Because at the beginning, you always begin as a child unless you're strange and you grow backwards.
That past setting sun. That shouldn't be hard for you guys to have spotted. How many of you spotted that without my help? Good. That's the sort of thing you guys need to be looking for. Let's talk about the hard vocabulary words, though, just real quick so there's no misunderstanding, all right? This is the last 3 lines of the one with the most vocabulary in it. What is the dews drew quivering and chill simply saying? Yes, Tyler.
Like dew on a leaf.
Well, that's morning dew is what you're thinking of. That's the dew she's talking about. But what does it mean that they drew quivering and chill? Anna?
The
Shh. Listen to each other, please.
dew was really cold. The dew was cold.
The air is chilly that morning, all right? That's all they're saying there. You can't let the fancy language make you realize sometimes it's not that hard of a thing that she's saying. What about gossamer, my gown? Anyone find the cool definition of gossamer? All right, Henry, what's gossamer mean? Cobweb is actually what gossamer, or it's material like cobwebs. She's actually dressed in cobwebs. That might tell you a little bit about how long this journey has been going on. Oh, there goes some ahas. It starts with vocabulary, doesn't it? Her scarf, that tippet and tulle is how you say that. This is scarf, right? And this is veil. Am I right about those 2 words? I don't use either of these words very often.
Machine made silk.
But basically, this stanza is saying she is cold and she isn't dressed for this to be much warmer. But you got to imagine it. Death might be a little bit cold, don't you imagine? All right, so she's dressed maybe the way she needs to. Let's talk about this stanza real fast, because here's where people get thrown. She's not being literal here. We paused before a house, not a literal one, that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. What's she talking about, Mason? You're giving me a vocab word. What's she actually talking about with the whole stanza here? Anna's got it, so does Mom. I'm gonna try Michaela though first. Michaela.
I'm kind of guessing the graveyard in Norway.
Oh, the house that's a swelling of the ground. There's a little bump. All right, then that roof was scarcely visible. The cornice in the ground. We know that the cornice means if you're ever in a fancy old building, between the top part of the ceiling or the top part of the wall and the ceiling, that fancy molding they put up there. That's what cornice is. What could she be referring to? It's the cornice. Oh, Anna just knows. Travis.
Maybe mold or algae.
Yeah, that's a good guess. I'm hitting the light here so you can see my coffin. The cornice underground is what she's referring to. The fancy ridge on the top of her coffin is what she's talking about. All right, so those two tricks in mind. Go back to your discussion for, let's say, 1 or 2 minutes. Now that you know that stuff, what is her attitude towards this road trip that she's been on with death? And you better be able to tell me how long this road trip's been going on, because it tells you right in the poem. All right, go ahead and go back to the poem. I'm going to come around for questions. Go.
First of all, it's been going on for centuries.
I'm not going to say that's wrong, but
it is.
Is that what you really were going to ask me?
So I think going on forever, does that mean death is eternal or life? Yeah, it'd be the life.
Attitude. What's her attitude towards this road trip? Start buying it with the evidence, all right?
I don't think she's really, I think she's thinking of this more of an experience really than of something bad, because
fear is a tone. That's interesting.
Describing it in a carriage and everything. Maybe she's on a road, a journey, or a trip, or maybe she was leading into it. I don't know. So I don't think she really minds it.
Yeah, plus she doesn't even
Well,
I knew this would happen.
What?
Okay, what about her attitude?
Teenage attitude.
We already said welcoming and accepting.
How are you getting teenage attitude?
I didn't. Okay.
Microphone right there. I'm checking it later.
She welcomed it but was not expecting it.
Dylan looks worried. Dylan looks worried.
She's welcoming it, but she will not expect it when it comes.
That's definitely not a teenage attitude.
When it comes to the girl. The teenage attitude's drugs.
All right.
Netflix, which is basically the same thing.
Finishing that conversation in 10.
How are you getting teenage attitude? You haven't
5,
presented any evidence.
4. Oh, you want to finish it now. Tia, how long's this road trip been going on?
We said centuries, but it'll go on for
How do
eternity.
you know that?
Because
Centuries.
what? Yeah, I got that. Okay, it says, since then 'tis centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day. I feel submersed, the horses' heads were towards eternity.
Work towards eternity. It says it right there, all right? And that's what you have to get ready to look for. I'm not just going to give you a bunch of questions about the poem. I want you guys to follow that. This has been a long journey for her, all right? And her tone towards the experience is where I want you guys to eventually get to. I actually want you to compare this tone and decide if it's the same or if it's different from the shorter poem, which is a little bit easier to understand. And so let us move to the second poem. I'm going to get it up here so we can make sure we understand it. All right. Shall we read it again, or do we need to? Actually, you know what? I don't think we need to read this one again. We read it once. Let me have you just kind of keep in mind. This is a little different. The person in this poem, I think it was someone in this class who joked the other day on the poem where she entered the sea, and the sea almost swallowed her up until she just barely escaped. Someone said, I think it was in this group, said, well, she had to get away because she went home to write the poem, all right? And these poems kind of defy that logic because she's dead and she's writing this poem. Same thing here. There's a difference here, Tia, though. She has recently died versus she has died a long time ago. And when they talk about the eyes around her had been wrung dry, she doesn't die alone in her. We assume she dies in her own house, which is probably how people passed away back then, most commonly. They have wrung their eyes out. Talk about what this poem is talking about in ways of death. And again, our goal here is tone. Does the poet have a different expectation than what happens? Is it what the poet has been taught to expect what happens in that moment that you pass away? And apparently she had the brilliancy to get it written down and sent back to us right in just time so that we could read this poem, all right? So, I heard a fly buzz when I died. Same process. There's really only 1 or 2 words in here that you should have an issue with. Let me hear what this poem's trying to say about death with your group. Go.
I think it's basically as she's dying, so...
I will like say signed away with she died twice. Could be assignable. That sounds like she's willing away all of her.
It sounds to me as if she was dying before her time. Like, you know how they say, oh, like when a person who's younger dies, it was before their time. It sounds like she was before her time to die. So she was trying to get all her stuff together in her life before she went away so that the people around her could...
So it almost seems like in this poem, it seems like she was rushed, but not like
Are we in the poem, Dylan? Okay, Nathan,
rushed
we in the
to
poem?
death, rushed to dying. You know what I mean?
Stanza by stanza, I would as a group go through it, make sure you're understanding everything.
Last line, trying to say.
Her breaths were getting frogs.
Amazing, isn't it?
I think the king...
She actually wrote quite a few more poems in this spirit. The dead can write poems and send them to us.
I think the king is God. For the last onset, when the king being witnessed in the room,
So for her last onset, she's like thanking God for her life or whatever.
and like he was there when it all went down.
And so this is saying that
All right, I'm a little worried.
with all the eyes.
Our conversation seemed to have dwindled a little bit with this second poem. Let me give you a few clues, shall I, Dawson? All right, some things to think about. I've underlined some ideas that might be worth talking about here. First of all, the stillness in the air when she died was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. What does heaves mean? What's heaves mean, Anna?
Like
Like heaves. Michaela, what's heaves mean?
Like draining to like pull or push.
Push like Sisyphus pushing his boulder uphill, that would be heaves, all right? You also can heave in the following way. If you feel really nauseous but you have nothing in your stomach, heave, all right? And so think about what those heaves mean. Are we talking about the eye of a hurricane where it gets really still for a little while before the hurricane comes back? Or is it just the calm before the storm, and it's a more gentle storm? So talk about what the storm might mean. She says the king there could be a religious reference. Could be Elvis. We don't know. It got capitalized, all right? It could be death. She just calls him the king of the underworld, perhaps. I don't know. You guys can talk about that. And then when she wills away her keepsakes, she doesn't mean like she wills with her mind for something to happen. It means like a legal will. She gives away her things, the things that she can give away, which is always to me an interesting later sacred writing topic. What could you give away when you pass away, and what can't you give away when you pass away? And then finally, please note, she does say, I could not see to see. When a poet repeats something, that's always important, all right? Go back to the poem. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to have a tone for this one, and in that 4 minutes, Dylan, you also have to decide, are the tones for the poems different or the same about the topic? Both about death. What is she saying? Similarly or different tone-wise? Attitude. What's her attitude towards what's happened to her? Go!
Okay,
I'm watching the clock.
there was stillness in the air between the heat and the storm. I think it's kind of like it gives us a little hint on how she died. You know, like a sickness maybe. Know what I mean?
Yeah, like heaps, if we're talking about it the latter way.
And then also for like the king, I'm pretty sure she was talking about.
See what you did there, Cole. See what you did there.
And she's like realizing it has to be done.
Well, isn't she dying?
Yeah, she's like kind of accepted the fact even though it might have been like a little unbelievable at first, because in the first line of the second stanza it says the eyes around had run and died. Like maybe you were crying, but now you're like
Which room,
like around when they was dry, like squeeze out the
Of the king is basically a fancy way of saying that. That's a weird compound word.
I think it interposed what happened. Like, do you know how flies fly away from you? She tried the one who takes your life. She gave away interposed the fly. That was
When she died. I think she died in her house.
Yeah, because
So what's that mean, Jared?
you have to take words in the middle, so basically it's comparing on what they're like.
Give me the
And I said it again.
What interposes what?
So there interposed a fly.
Okay, the fly is the interposer. What got interposed? What does it go in between? What are the two things? Group can help them out.
The king and her.
Maybe. Are we in the same stanza? No. It's a different stanza, so it might not be that one.
Life, I guess.
Okay. What do you think, Katie? Where's our interposed to fly line?
Well, in my opinion, I think she's giving everything away, and so all these people are getting what they want, and then you say fly, it's kind of like there's nothing else there, so they're like, oh, I got my stuff now, let's go.
It's the fly getting what he wants. Just a thought. Just a thought.
Half of her ashes thrown into the ocean with the whales, and then the other half she wanted to keep. So I mean, it's not like you can't distribute your ashes. Yeah, because you but can. that's
half of your ashes, not like a specific part of your ashes.
Have you been to the ocean
I
before?
want you to keep my
Pause button. Zip. 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, I'm calling on someone from your group to tell me are the tones similar or different, and you have to be able to justify it. All right. If you're gonna say that she's excited, you better be able to prove to me something in the poem that made you think she was excited. All right. Tone. Are they the same? Are they different? You have 2 minutes as a group to decide.
That she feels a little
Make
bit
sure
more rushed
anyone in
and
your group can answer that I choose to call on.
Really, she's talking about.
as we've already said, I'm just recapping a little bit. He's a storm.
You're being literal, Henry. You're being literal.
Had run was dry, so meaning that she would go in and out.
what is to be, basically.
So they're the same, just the purposes are different.
Okay, so we all got this because I don't feel like
Blue
it.
screening.
Okay, cameras coming. What is that?
And I could not see
Great magic.
We agree.
So what's the
really
tone
about
then, like?
Mr. Harrison, for background for her computer, she had a window open with a picture of Eldis.
You know what?
He was witnessed in the room, and then
It's like the last guy's trying to convince me she was a vampire. There was no addiction to vampire literature back then.
There's no.
Tia, make Henry stop talking. Figure out what the tone really is. Henry, you're off on a fanciful trip. What's it really about? What's it really about? You're on pretty deep? What's your deepest thought so far? Yeah. Is Riley listening to this? Does she agree? All right.
And then also like we think that she read So
Interesting. What makes it mean that?
Was like that she has a disease or whatever,
Think?
so she loses her hearing from
from this. So like her hearing's going like numb or whatever.
Okay.
And then so like she tells all the people, and then that's why they're crying. And then she creates the will.
Interesting.
And then this is like when she loses her sight or whatever, and then she just can't see.
Do you agree, Sonia?
Also,
What makes you think she has a disease?
Well, like
Just the fly or something?
Well, she basically just loses her hearing or whatever. Well, that's what I think, like, because like you would just hear.
45 seconds. I'm calling on someone from your group for an answer. You all better be prepared to answer. That was interesting, Mason. That's an interesting interpretation.
Interesting.
Could be a disease.
Richie, you got an answer if I'm calling you? Dylan, you got an answer if I'm calling you?
I don't know.
I could not see to see. What can see mean more than just this? Feel? Really? I see happiness. Richie was there. I think he just had it. Say it, Richie.
I see it. They're still. They're not actually seeing it. Like I can see what's coming.
All right, I think that's enough time. We're gonna run out of time here. We never like that to happen. Let's see. Let's do this in order so Mr. Harrison doesn't lose track. Samantha, in the back, would you please tell us tones? Let me put both phones up here first of all, so we can remember which ones we're talking about. There's our first. Poem 1, poem 2, so we can talk about it. I want to know what you think the tone is here, what you think the tone is here, and if they're similar or different, all right? And if you have an interpretation, I hope you'll kind of explain your interpretation. Can you do it, Samantha?
Yeah.
Okay, first poem.
So the first poem, I think Emily Dixon is kind of more mature on death.
Okay.
And then in the second one, I guess it's just like, it kind of happens. And she's explaining like how it kind of happens, death.
Do we have a tone for her for that second one, though?
I think the tone is more like
how does she
surprise,
feel about what happened?
I guess I want to say surprise.
Surprise, all right. So maturity in the first one, just because it's been going on so long, and so maybe wisdom or maturity, and then surprise. Those are your words. Interesting. All right. Michaela, would you make Dylan answer for your group?
Yeah.
He's been so quiet today. He's been so quiet back there.
Yeah, totally quiet.
Dylan.
Okay, for the first one, I said that like she's kind of scared to die, like because it says it feels shorter than a day, and the roof was scarcely visible.
Okay, and that makes you think of scared. Okay, interesting.
And then the second one, I think that she's like just giving herself away because she willed her keepsakes and signed away.
Okay, so she's just giving herself away, so she's giving in to the fact that she's gonna die. All right, interesting. All right. Riley, would you speak for your group, please?
We decided that it was like she might have a disease or something where she's losing her hearing because when she
Are we in this
hears
one?
a fly.
First poem?
Oh, the first poem.
Are you in the second poem first? That's fine. Keep going with that one then.
And she's like okay with it, like she's accepts that she is gonna die and everybody will die, so she's kind of preparing herself to die.
Okay.
In that one, and then in the first one, she's kind of, I think she's like, just go with the flow because she's like on the ride. She can't really stop it or like.
You can't scream, stop this ride, like you can at the carnival. She's just kind of stuck on it. She's going with the flow. All right, interesting tone words. Let's see, Tia, would you speak for your group, please?
Okay, so in the first one, we kind of said that she was starting to get used to it, and she kind of accepted what was happening.
So acceptance is a tone. Interesting, good.
And then the second one, we thought that she was more negative towards it, and she was kind of saddened by it, and it was more of a mysterious.
Tell me something specific that made you think she was negative about it. This is called citing the text, ladies and gentlemen. What made you think she had negative thoughts towards it?
Because it says, between the heaves of storm.
Okay.
So it was almost like the break in the storm, but she was preparing for the storm to come afterwards.
All right. Rest of the group, anything else in there that made you guys feel it was a little negative, that second one? Henry, is that what your answer's about?
Well, it said they're interposed to fly, so like she wasn't as prepared for it or like as accepting of it as she was in the first one.
Okay.
She was more like, I hope it doesn't happen, just pushing it away.
Interesting. There's a light and a window, and she sees it, and then there's a fly right between her, and I can see how we might decipher a little negativity out of that. All right, Drew, you want to add to that?
Also, when it says the eyes around had run them dry, it's basically saying that everybody else was kind of saddened by it. So it's sort of showing the third person as
Interesting.
well.
All right, Brent, I'm going to let you speak for your group. I'm listening.
For the second one about the fly, I think that stands as like the fly is death and it's sort of a pest.
Okay.
Sort of like a bug that is just annoying.
When you die, how many of you want a little pest bothering you? And that's what's happened to her. And so is that kind of where you're getting the idea that she has a negative feeling towards death in the second one? All right. How about that first poem? Someone else in the group want to talk about the first poem? Because I could not stop for death. Cole?
Okay.
Talk you into it? Good.
Sure, okay. So, well, her attitude about it is that, like, she doesn't really want to do it, but now that she is going to die, she wants to hurry it up, and she doesn't want to have to take this whole long trip, like, thinking about her life. She just wants to die already because it's getting kind of boring.
Give me a word for that. She's what? Give me an adjective. She's feeling what?
Annoyed.
Annoyed?
Impatient.
Impatient? There we go. I think that's what you're trying to say. So the tone being impatient. All right. Katie, would you speak for your group, please?
So I think the first one, it's more her theory maybe about, I think they're both maybe what happens after
Okay.
you die. And so maybe the first one is that it's just a long journey of death and that's pretty much all it really is.
Death is just a never-ending journey? Interesting.
And then the second one, you said earlier, like, I think like a couple days ago or something, that she is really religious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when she says the king, she's probably talking about God.
Okay.
And so maybe it's when her other theory of when you die, it's going to heaven, or maybe that theory.
Okay, so a more of a religious tone to the last one. I'm going to let Mackenzie, since she's been so quiet today, speak for her group, this last group here, on tones of these two poems. Mackenzie.
So kind of going off, for the first one, kind of going off of what Cole said,
Mm-hmm.
my group thought that she was kind of bored about the journey because it didn't really tell much about her, what she saw on her journey.
Okay.
So she only key pointed on how long it was.
How long it was, nice.
And then also in the second one, it's kind of the opposite because we thought that she seemed more rushed, not a bad kind of rushed, but like kind of like when somebody that you're expecting shows up 10 minutes early.
Okay. Interesting analogy. Not like you don't want the movie to end because it's so good and it ends too soon, or more of that analogy?
No, more of like where it's okay if it comes, but you would rather it not come.
Interesting. Final thought to Travis. Go, Travis.
So we thought that the poem's kind of connected because when you first die, it's all like craziness and like everybody's crying and stuff. But like when you're with the other poem, it's talking about how it's like a never-ending journey, really.
Okay.
So you just have to like learn to accept it.
All right. I'm going to give you guys the following challenge to fold this poem up when I say we're done for the day, we're not done yet. When I say we're done, and put it in your writer's notebook. One of my favorite things to do with a poet who always writes in the same rhythm is to impersonate that poet's rhythm style. It's kind of fun to do. I actually have a whole poem in my writer's notebook on my first terrible car that I owned. 1972 Ford Pinto. It was a piece of junk that, and I wrote a tribute to it. It starts this way: because I could not fix my Ford, I bought a Subaru. My Pinto leaked just too much oil and braking fluid too. And I have an entire poem here on tribute of my poem. I'll bet some of you could write a parody of either of these two poems. I heard a blank when I blanked. All right, I bet you guys can figure out how to write 868686. Impersonate our friend Emily Dickinson. All right. Your homework this week is continuing to finish your nonfiction. You do have vocabulary due this week, and so do me a favor. Would you fold up your poems, put them in your writer's notebooks? We'll get them in our binders next time. As you leave today, I'm going to be at the door. Make sure you hand me your exit tickets make sure your name's on them so I know everybody made their sentences.